The Apache woman bought a captive cowboy by nightfall. She claimed him as her husband. The wind moved lazily through the dry grass, carrying with it the faint scent of sagebrush and distant campfires. A lone cowboy rode across the empty landscape, his horse kicking up clouds of dust with each careful step. His name was Jacob, a young man of 25, with sun-browned skin, sharp eyes, and a lean, wiry frame hardened by years of traveling the wild frontier. He had been separated from his cattle drive after a sudden storm had scattered the herd, leaving him alone and wary in a land he knew only in patches. Every sound made him alert, every shadow made him pause, for the desert could be both beautiful and deadly. Jacob had been traveling for hours, his horse moving steadily but tiredly under him. Water was scarce, and the sun was already climbing high into the sky. He scanned the horizon for any sign of movement, cattle, other travelers, or a water source, but all he saw was the vast, rolling expanse of desert, broken only by rocky hills and scattered mesquite trees. He knew he needed to find water soon, or both he and his horse would not last the day. The heat pressed down on him, and he wiped the sweat from his forehead, his fingers sticky with dust. Every step felt heavier, every sound sharper. Unseen by Jacob, a group of Apache warriors watched him from a ridge above. They had been tracking the cowboy since dawn, careful to remain hidden. Among them was a woman named Nayeli, a figure of strength and calm, with dark eyes that seemed to see everything and a presence that commanded respect. Nayeli was known in her tribe for her intelligence, her courage, and her skill in survival. She had lived her life in the harsh desert, learning from her father and mother, from her elders, and from the land itself. She could read the tracks of animals, understand the signs of water, and sense danger long before it arrived. And now she was studying the lone cowboy with a mixture of curiosity and caution. The warriors whispered among themselves, debating what to do. Some suggested taking him by force, others argued for keeping distance. Nayeli, however, had already made her decision. She saw the man not merely as prey, but as a person to be claimed and protected, even if only for a short time. She wanted to test him, to see if he was brave, clever, and capable of understanding the ways of her people. The desert was not a place for the weak, and she believed that even someone like this outsider might hold hidden strength. Jacob pressed on, unaware of the eyes that followed him. He slowed as he reached a small clearing where a stream trickled quietly over smooth stones. He dismounted, letting his horse drink first, careful to keep his hands visible and steady. He had learned long ago that sudden movements could startle an animal, or worse, a person. He bent to scoop water in his hands, the cool liquid refreshing his parched throat. For a moment he allowed himself a deep breath, thinking he might have found a brief respite from the endless journey. But the desert rarely offered peace for long. Suddenly, a sharp sound cracked through the air, and Jacob froze. He looked up, scanning the ridge above, his hand instinctively moving toward the small revolver at his hip. A shadow shifted in the rocks. Another appeared. The horse pricked its ears and whinnied softly. Jacob's heart pounded, but he did not panic. He had faced danger before, storms, wild animals, and even hostile men, but he had never faced a situation quite like this. Slowly he rose to his feet, his eyes fixed on the ridge. Then he saw her, Nayeli, stepping forward, her movements smooth and confident. Her eyes were steady, unwavering, and she held a short spear in one hand. She was alone, yet she carried herself as if she were backed by the strength of her whole tribe. Jacob raised his hand slightly, showing he meant no harm. Nayeli studied him carefully. There was intelligence in his eyes, a spark of courage, and the way he carried himself told her he was not easily broken. She signaled to her companions to hold back, watching how he reacted. The cowboy's lips pressed into a thin line and he spoke in a cautious voice. "I mean no trouble. I'm just looking for water." His words were calm, but there was a hint of wariness. Every instinct in his body told him to be careful, yet he could sense that she was not an immediate threat. Naomi nodded once, almost imperceptibly, then gestured for him to remain still. She moved closer, her steps silent on the rocky ground. Jacob tensed, but he did not run. He could feel the tension in the air, the weight of the desert around him, and the presence of a woman who seemed as much a part of the land as the rocks and wind. She reached him and stopped, examining him carefully. Her gaze was sharp, searching for signs of weakness or deceit. Jacob met her eyes, and for the first time in days he felt seen, not just as a man lost in the desert, but as someone who mattered, someone whose fate was now tied to hers. The moment stretched, filled only by the whisper of wind through the grass and the gentle ripple of the stream. Naomi finally spoke, her voice calm but commanding. "You will come with me," she said simply. There was no question, no threat, just a statement of fact. Jacob's heart leapt. He realized that resistance could mean danger, but there was something in her tone that suggested fairness, not cruelty. Slowly, he nodded, understanding that his survival depended on this moment of cooperation. The horse shifted uneasily but did not flee. It seemed to sense the same careful control that Naomi exerted over the situation. As they prepared to move, Naomi signaled to the other warriors, who stepped out of hiding to flank Jacob. He walked between them, his eyes alert, yet his mind began to calm. Naomi stayed close, her presence both reassuring and formidable. She led the way across the desert, moving with a sure-footed grace that made the journey seem less arduous. The cowboy followed, feeling the strange mix of fear and admiration growing within him. Every step reminded him of how unpredictable life could be, and how quickly the roles of hunter and captive could reverse. By mid-afternoon, they reached a small canyon where they paused. Naomi checked their surroundings, then turned to him. "You will eat and rest here," she said, indicating a shaded area near a cluster of rocks. "Tomorrow, we continue." Jacob lowered himself carefully, grateful for the shade, and accepted the small bundle of dried meat and water she offered. He ate slowly, careful not to appear weak, while Naomi watched him, assessing his character. Her eyes softened slightly, though she did not smile. There was a quiet understanding developing, an unspoken recognition of the difficulties they both faced in a harsh and unforgiving land. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the canyon floor, Jacob and Naomi settled into a cautious rhythm. He tended to his horse, she prepared a small fire, and the air filled with the smell of smoke mingling with desert dust. Neither spoke much, but the silence was comfortable, filled with mutual awareness and respect. For the first time, Jacob allowed himself to imagine that he might survive this encounter, not through luck alone, but through the guidance of the woman who had taken him under her control. Night fell quickly in the desert, bringing with it a chill that nipped at exposed skin. Stars dotted the sky like scattered diamonds, and the canyon echoed with the calls of distant animals. Jacob sat close to the fire, his thoughts heavy but tempered by the realization that he was not entirely alone. Naomi remained alert, scanning the darkness, a protector as much as a captor. There was tension, yes, but also a strange sense of security in her presence. In this vast, wild land, survival depended on understanding, trust, and respect, and both of them were beginning to learn those lessons, even without words. As they rested, the bond between captor and captive began to form, fragile but real. The cowboy had been taken against his will, yet he felt no cruelty in the woman's actions, only a firm assertion of authority and an unexpected care. Naomi, in turn, observed him with a keen eye, noting his courage, resilience, and the hint of humanity that made him different from many outsiders who had crossed her path. In the quiet of the canyon, under the vast desert sky, the first chapter of their shared story began, not with violence but with cautious understanding, a recognition of strength, and the subtle beginnings of respect that could change the course of both their lives. The first light of morning broke over the canyon, sending pale golden rays across the dusty rocks and sparse desert vegetation. Jacob woke to the soft sounds of birds calling in the distance and the gentle rustle of the wind through the sagebrush. He stretched, feeling the stiffness of sleep in his muscles, and glanced over at Nayeli. She had already risen, moving silently among the rocks as she checked their surroundings. Her movements were precise and careful, showing the discipline and awareness that came from years of living in the harsh desert. Jacob watched her for a moment, marveling at her confidence and the way she seemed completely at home in this unforgiving landscape. After a moment, Nayeli approached him. Her eyes were sharp, as if she could see straight through him. "We must move," she said quietly. Her voice carried authority, but it was not harsh. "The sun will rise high soon, and it is not safe to linger in one place for too long. We must reach the village by nightfall." Jacob nodded, understanding the wisdom in her words. The desert was unpredictable, and traveling during the cooler hours was a matter of survival. He gathered his few belongings and led his horse to follow her as she began down a narrow path that twisted between the rocks. The journey was slow and careful. Nayeli led the way, her feet finding the safest paths through the rocky terrain. She occasionally stopped to examine tracks in the sand, small clues that revealed the movement of animals or the presence of other travelers. Jacob followed closely, trying to match her careful steps. He realized that every movement she made was deliberate, each decision guided by knowledge that had been passed down through generations. He admired her skill and began to understand that this journey would not be simple, not just because of the land, but because of the challenges of navigating her world. As they traveled, Jacob tried to speak, breaking the silence that stretched between them. "Where are we going?" he asked cautiously. Nayeli glanced at him, her eyes assessing his tone. "To my village," she replied simply. "You will stay there until your fate is decided. My people will see you as I do, and then we will know what is right." Jacob nodded slowly, understanding that resistance now could only make things worse. There was a strange mix of fear and curiosity in him. He had been captured, yet there was no cruelty in her actions, only firm control and a sense of fairness. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher, baking the desert with its heat. Jacob felt sweat running down his back, and he offered water to his horse, who drank eagerly. Nayeli moved beside him, carrying a small bundle of supplies. She did not offer water, as she had long learned to ration what she had carefully, but she did glance at him briefly, a silent acknowledgement that survival depended on both of them. The cowboy felt a small measure of gratitude toward her. Though he was her captive, he could see that she respected life and the balance of the desert, and he sensed that she might treat him differently than the others might have. By midday, they paused at a shallow canyon where shade offered a brief respite. Nayeli signaled for Jacob to rest while she prepared a simple meal of dried meat and bread. She worked quickly, her hands skilled and efficient, moving with the rhythm of someone who had done this 100 times before. Jacob watched, impressed by her calm and steady presence. He had faced danger in many forms, but this calm authority was something entirely new. He realized that survival was not only about strength, but also about intelligence, awareness, and the ability to act decisively when needed. While they ate, they exchanged few words, but there was a growing understanding between them. Jacob learned a little about her through careful observation, the way she treated the small animals around them, the respect she showed for the desert, and the way she made quick decisions without hesitation. Nayeli, in turn, watched Jacob closely. She noted his careful movements, his ability to remain calm under stress, and the hint of respect he showed toward her leadership. Though neither spoke openly of emotions, there was a subtle recognition that they were beginning to understand each other in ways beyond words. After the short rest, they continued on their journey. The canyon opened into a wider plain, the horizon stretching endlessly. Jacob felt both awe and unease. The vastness of the land reminded him how small he was in comparison, and how much he relied on Naeli to guide him safely. She moved ahead confidently, scanning the terrain, while Jacob followed closely, keeping his eyes and ears alert for any sign of danger. The desert was beautiful, but it was also a place of hidden threats, steep drops, quicksand, or wild animals that moved silently. During a brief stop by a small creek, Jacob noticed a change in Naeli's demeanor. She seemed thoughtful, as if weighing the decisions of the day ahead. "My people will want to see you," she said finally. "They will ask many questions. You must answer honestly. Lies will not help you." Jacob swallowed and nodded. He realized that his fate now rested not only on her choices, but also on his own behavior. Honesty and respect could be his only tools to survive, and perhaps even gain a measure of safety and trust among a people he barely knew. The afternoon wore on, and the heat of the desert began to fade as the sun moved westward. Shadows grew longer, and the temperature dropped slightly, offering relief from the harsh midday sun. Jacob began to appreciate the desert in a new way: the beauty of the red rocks, the sound of wind through the canyons, and the stillness that seemed to hang over the land. Naeli moved with purpose, her eyes never straying from the path, yet there was a quiet rhythm to her movements that suggested she was at ease despite the harsh environment. Jacob felt a growing respect for her skill, realizing that she had lived her entire life in conditions that would test even the strongest men. As they approached the outskirts of her village, the landscape changed. Small wooden structures appeared in the distance, partially hidden among rocks and trees. Smoke curled from several chimneys, and the sounds of voices carried across the plain. Naeli slowed her pace, signaling for Jacob to do the same. She explained briefly that the elders would need to see him, and that it was important to follow her instructions carefully. Jacob's heart raced. He had never been in a situation like this before, captured, yet treated with a strange sense of respect. He realized that the coming hours would determine his immediate future and possibly change the course of his life forever. When they reached the village, Naeli called out to several of the residents, and a few figures approached cautiously. The elders, older men and women with lined faces and sharp eyes, studied Jacob carefully. Naeli spoke briefly, explaining that he was her responsibility and that she had brought him safely to their village. The elders nodded, acknowledging her authority, but their eyes were filled with curiosity and caution. Jacob felt a mix of fear and relief. Though he had been captured, he was now in a situation where fairness and respect were possible, and he understood that Naeli's word carried weight. Jacob was led to a small space near the center of the village, where he could rest and drink water. The elders asked him questions, speaking slowly and clearly, and he answered with honesty, careful not to say anything that might offend or mislead them. Naeli watched silently, standing nearby, ensuring that he was treated fairly. The interaction was tense at first, but Jacob's calm demeanor and respect for the customs of the tribe began to ease the tension. He realized that survival required more than physical skill. It demanded patience, understanding, and the ability to adapt to new ways of thinking. As evening approached, the village began to quiet down. Families gathered around fires, children played nearby, and the air cooled as the sun dipped below the horizon. Jacob found himself reflecting on the events of the day, the capture, the journey, and the careful decisions that had led him to this point. He realized that Naeli had not only guided him through the desert, but had also shown him a different way of seeing the world, through awareness, respect, and quiet strength. Despite being a captive, he felt a growing sense of respect for her, and a cautious hope that he might survive this encounter with his dignity intact. By nightfall, the village was bathed in the soft glow of the fires, and Jacob understood that his life had changed in a single day. He had been captured, yet he was alive, treated fairly, and now had the chance to prove himself to a people he barely knew. Naeli stood nearby, watching the activities of the village, her presence a constant reminder that he was under her care and authority. In the quiet moments, Jacob realized that he had learned something important. Survival was not just about strength or skill, but about understanding, trust, and the choices of those around him. As he lay down to rest that night, Jacob felt a strange mix of fear and gratitude. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew that he had a protector in Naeli, someone whose skill and judgment had kept him safe in a dangerous land. For the first time in many days, he felt a sense of possibility, a quiet hope that, despite being a captive, he might find a way to navigate this new world with respect, courage, and perhaps even a growing understanding of the woman who had claimed responsibility for him. The next morning, the desert was quiet, with a cool breeze carrying the faint scent of sage and dry earth. Jacob woke to the soft sound of birds and the gentle crackling of a fire nearby. He rubbed his eyes and looked around. Naeli was already awake, moving silently among the small huts of the village. She carried a small bundle of supplies, her movements calm and purposeful. Jacob admired her skill and grace. She seemed completely at home here, in a world so different from the open plains he had known. After a brief breakfast of dried meat and bread, Naeli motioned for him to follow. Today, she said, he would begin learning about the ways of the tribe. The elders wanted him to observe and understand, to see how life was lived in this harsh but carefully balanced environment. Jacob felt a mixture of curiosity and nervousness. He had never been part of a community like this, and he understood that every step, every word, and every action could affect how he was seen. He tried to keep his movements careful, respectful, and deliberate. Naeli led him to a nearby clearing where several women of the tribe were working together to prepare food and gather water. She introduced Jacob to them briefly, explaining that he was under her care and would stay with them for a time. The women observed him quietly at first, but their expressions were not unkind. Jacob noticed the strength in their movements, the precision in their tasks, and the unspoken rules that guided their work. He felt a growing respect for their skill, realizing that survival in the desert required not just courage but cooperation, knowledge, and attention to detail. As they moved through the village, Naeli explained some of the customs. "Our people respect the land," she said. "We take only what we need. We listen to the animals, the wind, and the water. Everything has a place and everything has meaning. You must learn this if you wish to survive and be treated as part of our community." Jacob listened carefully. Her words were simple, yet they carried the weight of wisdom and experience. He understood that he could not merely act as he had in the open plains. Here, survival required understanding, patience, and respect for ways he had never known. Later in the day, Naeli took him on a walk outside the village. She showed him how to read tracks in the sand, how to find signs of water, and how to notice changes in the wind that could indicate weather shifts or approaching danger. Jacob followed her closely, trying to match her keen observation skills. He realized that every detail mattered: the angle of a footprint, the way grass bent in the wind, the subtle changes in the color of the sky. Naeli moved like someone who had lived with these lessons all her life, and he was in awe of her abilities. While they walked, she asked him questions about his own life. Jacob spoke cautiously, telling her about the cattle drives, the storms, and the challenges of traveling alone. Naeli listened intently, nodding occasionally, her expression thoughtful. She seemed to be evaluating him, not as a captive, but as someone whose character she needed to understand. Jacob realized that her respect for him was not given lightly, it had to be earned. And for the first time since being captured, he felt that his actions mattered, that he could influence the way he was treated. By afternoon, the sun grew hot and they returned to the village. Jacob noticed the children playing near the huts, the elders quietly observing from the shade, and the women continuing their work. There was a rhythm to life here, a careful balance that he had never experienced. Naomi led him to a small, shaded area and encouraged him to rest while she attended to other matters. Jacob drank water slowly and watched the daily activities. He began to see how every person had a role, how cooperation and mutual respect were essential for survival, and how leadership was exercised not through fear, but through guidance and knowledge. As the day wore on, Naomi returned and led him to a small gathering where the elders discussed important matters of the tribe. Jacob listened quietly, absorbing the conversation as best he could. He realized that the elders spoke not only of practical matters like food and water, but also of values, traditions, and the well-being of the community. The discussions were calm and deliberate, and Jacob felt a deep sense of respect for the way they governed themselves. It was unlike any leadership he had seen in the towns or settlements he had passed through. In the evening, Naomi asked Jacob to help with some of the evening chores. He carried water, helped prepare food, and assisted with small tasks under her guidance. She corrected him gently when he made mistakes, showing patience, but also making it clear that he needed to learn quickly. Jacob realized that she was teaching him not only the practical skills he would need to survive, but also the importance of understanding, respect, and humility. With every task, he felt himself becoming more aware of the life around him, more connected to the people who had accepted him under Naomi's authority. After the chores were done, they sat together near the fire, watching the sun sink below the horizon. Jacob noticed the calm in Naomi's expression, the confidence in the way she carried herself, and the way she seemed to belong completely to this place. He felt a mixture of admiration and gratitude. Though he was still a captive, he had begun to understand that she was not cruel, only firm. She had chosen to guide him, to test his courage and character, and to ensure that he could navigate a world so different from his own. The night grew quiet, filled only with the soft sounds of the desert and the distant calls of animals. Jacob reflected on the day and realized how much he had learned in such a short time. He understood that survival required more than strength or skill. It required observation, patience, respect, and the ability to adapt. He felt a growing sense of responsibility for his own actions, knowing that his behavior would determine how he was seen by Naomi, the elders, and the rest of the tribe. As they prepared to rest, Naomi spoke softly. "Tomorrow, you will learn more. You will see how we hunt, how we track, and how we respect the land. Pay attention, and do not be afraid to ask questions." Jacob nodded, understanding that his education in this new world had only just begun. He felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation, realizing that the challenges ahead would test not only his skills but also his character. That night, as he lay under the stars, Jacob thought about the journey that had brought him here. He remembered the capture, the long walk through the desert, and the careful way Naomi had guided him. He realized that she had not only saved his life, but also given him an opportunity to understand a world he had never known. Despite the uncertainty of the future, he felt a quiet hope that he could learn, survive, and perhaps earn a measure of trust and respect among these people. By the first light of dawn, Jacob was ready to face another day. He knew that Naomi would continue to test him, to challenge him, and to teach him. He understood that his survival and acceptance depended on his willingness to adapt, learn, and respect the customs of the tribe. And as he looked at Naomi, moving with her usual grace and confidence, he felt a sense of admiration and cautious trust growing within him. The bond between them was slowly strengthening. It was not yet friendship, and it was not yet loyalty, but it was a quiet understanding that each relied on the other. Naomi had claimed responsibility for him, and he had begun to see that her guidance was both firm and fair. In the stillness of the desert morning, Jacob felt the first stirrings of respect, trust, and recognition of the woman who had brought him safely to her people. The day stretched ahead, filled with lessons, observation, and careful steps. Jacob knew that the journey of understanding was only beginning, and that each moment would teach him something new, not only about survival in the desert, but also about courage, character, and the strength that could be found in respect and partnership. And so, as the sun climbed higher, Jacob followed Naeli through the village and into the desert beyond, ready to learn, ready to observe, and ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that the bond between captor and captive was quietly evolving into something more complex, something grounded in respect, understanding, and the slow discovery of shared humanity. The morning sun rose slowly, casting a warm golden light over the village. The desert air was crisp, carrying the scent of dry earth and sage. Jacob woke, feeling the cool breeze against his skin, and stretched carefully. He could hear the soft sounds of activity in the village, children laughing, women moving about their chores, and the distant calls of animals. He looked around and saw Naeli preparing for the day, her movements calm and deliberate as she checked the perimeter of the village. Her focus was sharp, and Jacob admired her confidence and skill. She had a presence that commanded respect, yet there was no harshness in her actions, only authority and care. After a simple breakfast, Naeli approached him. "Today the elders and my people will meet with you," she said, her voice firm but calm. "They will ask questions and you must answer honestly. Your words will matter." Jacob nodded, feeling a mixture of nervousness and determination. He had learned much about the tribe, their ways, and their respect for the land, but now he faced a moment that could change everything. His future in this village depended on how he conducted himself in the next few hours. They walked together to the center of the village, where a small gathering of elders and other villagers had formed. The elders, older men and women with lined faces and sharp, observant eyes, studied him carefully. Naeli stepped forward and addressed the group. "This man is under my care," she said. "I have brought him safely to our village. I will speak for him, and he will answer as I guide him. He is to be respected until we decide his role among us." The villagers murmured among themselves, a mixture of curiosity and surprise in their voices. It was unusual for a woman to claim authority in such a matter, yet Naeli's confidence silenced any doubts. Jacob stood quietly, his hands at his sides, listening to the conversation. He realized the gravity of the moment. His life, his freedom, and his acceptance depended on Naeli's words and his own honesty. He felt a wave of gratitude toward her. Though she had captured him, she had treated him with fairness and given him a chance to survive. He understood that respect could be earned through courage and truth, not just through strength or skill. The elders asked questions, each one carefully chosen to understand Jacob's character and intentions. They asked about his life, his skills, and his experiences in the world beyond the desert. Jacob answered slowly, choosing his words carefully, speaking truthfully about his cattle drives, his travels, and the storms he had faced alone. Naeli watched him closely, her eyes sharp, assessing his honesty and his demeanor. Jacob realized that she was not only his protector, but also his guide, ensuring that he represented himself properly before the tribe. As the questioning continued, Jacob noticed the subtle glances between Naeli and the elders. She was asserting her authority, making it clear that her decision mattered, and that she had the right to claim responsibility for him. The villagers began to see the strength of her leadership, the careful balance of respect and command she wielded. Jacob felt a growing admiration for her, recognizing that her courage was not only physical, but also in the way she navigated her community and upheld the tribe's values. After the questioning, Naeli stepped forward again. "By our tradition, a man under my care is considered my responsibility," she said, her voice clear and unwavering. He will stay with me, and I claim him as my husband until he proves his loyalty and honor. This is not punishment, but a test of character. He will learn our ways, respect our customs, and show that he is worthy of trust and partnership." The words were met with silence at first, then a cautious murmur of approval. The elders nodded, acknowledging her authority and the fairness of her decision. Jacob felt a surge of emotions. He was surprised, nervous, and unsure of what this new role meant. Yet, he also sensed the fairness in Naeli's words. She was giving him a chance, not simply as a captive, but as someone who could earn respect and acceptance through his actions. He understood that his future depended on his behavior, his willingness to adapt, and his honesty. The weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders, and he realized that survival was only the first step. He now needed to prove his courage, character, and integrity. Naeli led him to a small hut near the edge of the village, where he would stay. She explained the expectations clearly. He would participate in daily chores, learn the customs and survival skills of the tribe, and demonstrate his respect and understanding. Jacob listened intently, absorbing every word. He realized that this was not a traditional marriage as he had known in towns or settlements, but a bond rooted in respect, responsibility, and shared survival. The unusual circumstances made him cautious, but he also felt a sense of determination to rise to the challenge. Over the next hours, Naeli guided Jacob through his first lessons as her claimed husband. They worked together gathering water from a nearby stream, preparing food for the village, and observing the careful way the tribe managed their resources. Naeli corrected him patiently when he made mistakes, but she also praised him when he showed skill or understanding. Jacob felt a growing sense of respect for her methods and for the tribe's way of life. He realized that leadership and authority were earned through knowledge, fairness, and courage, not simply by force or dominance. As they worked, Jacob began to notice subtle shifts in the villagers' behavior toward him. Some observed him closely, watching how he followed Naeli's guidance. Others offered small gestures of approval, a nod, a smile, or a word of encouragement. He realized that his actions mattered not just to Naeli, but to the community as a whole. Every task he completed correctly, every respectful interaction, helped him earn trust and acceptance. The realization filled him with a quiet determination. He would not fail. He would show that he could meet the expectations set before him. By afternoon, the sun was high, and the heat pressed down on the village. Jacob and Naeli took a brief rest under the shade of a large rock. They drank water and observed the activity around them. Children played nearby, women worked on food preparation, and men discussed tasks and plans for the village. Naeli spoke quietly, explaining the importance of each role and how the community relied on cooperation, understanding, and respect. Jacob listened carefully, understanding that survival was not just about strength, but about participation, learning, and mutual support. Later, Naeli led him to the hunting grounds outside the village. She showed him how to track animals, identify edible plants, and recognize signs of danger. Jacob followed closely, doing his best to observe and learn. Naeli tested his abilities, pointing out mistakes and showing him the correct methods. Each lesson was practical, rooted in the realities of life in the desert. Jacob realized that these skills were essential not only for survival, but also for earning the trust of Naeli and the tribe. He felt a mixture of nervousness and determination, understanding that the coming days would be a true test of his abilities and character. As the day turned into evening, they returned to the village. The sky was painted with soft shades of orange and pink, and the temperature cooled. Jacob felt tired but accomplished, proud of the tasks he had completed and the lessons he had learned. Naeli observed him with a careful eye, noting his progress and the effort he had made. She spoke briefly, emphasizing that respect, honesty and diligence were the qualities that would guide him toward acceptance and partnership within the tribe. Jacob nodded, understanding the weight of her words and the path that lay ahead. By nightfall, the village was quiet, with only the soft sounds of fire and the distant calls of animals. Jacob and Naeli sat together near the fire, reflecting on the day. He felt a growing sense of connection to her and to the tribe, though he knew his journey of understanding and acceptance had only begun. Naeli's calm authority and guidance had helped him navigate a challenging day, and he realized that the bond between them was deepening, not through force, but through mutual respect and shared experience. As the stars appeared in the sky, Jacob understood that his role as Naeli's claimed husband was more than survival. It was a test of character, courage, and understanding. He felt a quiet determination to prove himself, not only to Naeli but to the entire community. The lessons of the day had taught him that respect, honesty, and diligence could create a bond stronger than fear or force. And as he settled to rest under the vast desert sky, he felt a sense of hope and purpose, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new lessons, and a continued opportunity to earn trust, respect, and acceptance. The next morning, the desert was quiet and cool, with the first light of the sun stretching across the village. Jacob woke feeling a mixture of nervousness and determination. The days had passed quickly since Naeli claimed him as her husband, and each day had brought lessons, challenges, and a growing understanding of the world he had entered. He moved carefully, aware of his surroundings, and glanced at Naeli as she prepared for the day. She moved with her usual calm authority, her dark eyes sharp and observant, and Jacob felt a mixture of admiration and respect. He knew that his survival and acceptance depended on learning, observing, and proving himself through action, not words alone. After a simple breakfast, Naeli spoke quietly but firmly. "Today, you will accompany me fully in all tasks," she said. "You will help with the hunt, gather food, and assist the village. Observe carefully and follow my instructions. Your actions will show your commitment and understanding." Jacob nodded, swallowing the nervousness in his throat. He had learned much about her people and their ways, but now it was time to demonstrate that he could contribute meaningfully. The weight of responsibility rested heavily on him, but he welcomed the challenge. They left the village together, walking through the rocky terrain and arid plains. Naeli pointed out tracks in the sand, teaching Jacob how to identify the animals that had passed and predict their movements. Jacob watched carefully, repeating her instructions silently in his mind. At first, he stumbled, misreading the signs, but Naeli corrected him patiently, showing the proper technique without harshness. Jacob realized that learning here required humility and attention. Mistakes were opportunities for instruction, and success came through careful observation, respect, and effort. By midday, they reached a small grove where a few wild animals were known to gather. Naeli showed him how to move quietly and observe without disturbing the environment. Jacob followed her closely, trying to mimic her careful movements. She encouraged him to trust his instincts and pay attention to even the smallest details. When a rabbit appeared among the brush, Jacob froze and remembered her teachings. He was able to observe without startling it, a small victory that made Naeli nod with quiet approval. He felt a surge of pride, realizing that he was learning skills that could save his life in this harsh land. After the hunt, they gathered edible plants and prepared food for the village. Naeli guided him in identifying which plants were safe to eat and which could be harmful. Jacob listened carefully, following her instructions and asking questions when necessary. The work was tiring, but it was also satisfying. For the first time, he felt a real sense of contribution. His actions were meaningful, not just to himself, but to the community that had accepted him under Naeli's guidance. He understood that survival and trust were intertwined, and that respect could be earned through diligence and care. When they returned to the village in the afternoon, the elders and other villagers were watching. Jacob felt a mixture of pride and nervousness. They observed him quietly, noting how he followed Naeli's guidance and contributed to the daily tasks. Naeli explained his progress, emphasizing his honesty, effort, and willingness to learn. The villagers nodded in approval, and Jacob felt a sense of belonging, however cautious it might be. He realized that acceptance here was not given lightly. It had to be earned through consistent action, respect, and understanding. Throughout the day, Jacob continued to work alongside Naeli, helping with water gathering, tending animals, and preparing food. He paid close attention to her instructions, learning not only the practical skills, but also the deeper lessons about patience, observation, and the balance of life in the desert. Naeli watched him carefully, correcting mistakes, praising progress, and ensuring that he understood the importance of every task. Jacob began to feel a quiet bond forming between them, not friendship yet, but a growing respect and trust. He understood that this relationship, unusual as it was, depended on cooperation, loyalty, and shared experience. As evening approached, Naeli led him to a small ridge overlooking the village. The sun was setting, casting warm orange and pink hues across the desert. The wind moved gently, carrying the scent of sage and dry earth. Jacob felt a sense of peace he had never experienced in the open plains. Here, under the vast sky, with Naeli at his side, he felt a connection to the land, to the tribe, and to the woman who had claimed responsibility for him. The challenges of the day had tested him, but they had also shown him that he could adapt, learn, and contribute meaningfully to this world. They sat together quietly, observing the village below. Jacob thought about the journey that had brought him here, the capture, the long walk through the desert, and the lessons that had followed. He realized that he had grown in ways he had never imagined. His skills, patience, and understanding had all been tested, and he had discovered a resilience he did not know he possessed. Naeli spoke softly, her voice blending with the evening breeze. "You have done well today," she said. "You are learning. You are beginning to understand." That is how respect is earned. Jacob nodded, grateful for her guidance and quiet approval. That night, Jacob helped prepare the evening meal with Naeli and the other villagers. He worked carefully, following instructions and contributing where he could. The villagers offered him smiles and nods, small gestures that signaled their acceptance of him. Jacob realized that he was no longer an outsider entirely. Through his actions, honesty, and effort, he had begun to earn a place among them. He felt a quiet pride in his accomplishments and a sense of connection to the people around him. After the meal, Naeli led him to a small fire near the edge of the village. The stars were bright above, and the air was cool. She spoke softly, explaining more about the customs and values of the tribe. Jacob listened intently, absorbing each word. He realized that this bond between them, captor and captive, teacher and learner, was evolving into something more complex. It was built on respect, shared experience, and the recognition of courage and integrity. He felt a sense of gratitude and understanding that he had not felt before. Over the next few days, Jacob continued to learn and grow under Naeli's guidance. He practiced hunting, tracking, and gathering, each day improving his skills and confidence. Naeli observed him closely, correcting mistakes, praising progress, and testing his understanding. Jacob began to feel a deep respect for her strength, wisdom, and leadership. He realized that she had given him more than survival. She had given him the opportunity to become part of something larger, to understand a way of life rooted in balance, respect, and community. As the days passed, Jacob's bond with Naeli strengthened. They worked side by side, communicated through subtle gestures and shared understanding, and relied on each other for guidance and support. He felt a quiet trust growing between them, a recognition that their lives were now connected in ways beyond simple survival. Naeli had claimed him as her husband, but he had begun to see that the claim was not about ownership or control. It was about responsibility, guidance, and partnership. By the end of the week, Jacob had gained the respect of the elders and villagers. He moved confidently through daily tasks, contributed meaningfully to the community, and demonstrated patience, courage, and understanding. Naeli observed quietly, satisfied with his progress. The villagers began to see him not as a captive, but as someone who had earned his place through effort, honesty, and respect. Jacob felt a quiet sense of accomplishment and belonging, knowing that he had navigated a path that few outsiders could have managed. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned shades of deep orange and purple, Naeli and Jacob sat quietly together. The fire crackled gently, and the desert was filled with the soft sounds of night. Jacob felt a profound sense of gratitude and understanding. He realized that their journey from capture to trust, from fear to respect, had transformed him. Naeli had not only guided him through the desert but had shown him a new way to see the world, to value strength, patience, and community. He understood that this bond, unusual and unexpected as it was, had grown into something meaningful, built on shared experience, mutual respect, and understanding. As the stars twinkled above, Jacob reflected on the past days. He had survived the desert, learned the ways of the tribe, and earned the trust and respect of Naeli and her people. He realized that he had discovered courage, resilience, and a sense of purpose he had never known before. Naeli had claimed him as her husband, but he had begun to see that their connection was more than a tradition. It was a partnership, grounded in respect, understanding, and shared experience. That night Jacob lay beneath the stars, feeling the cool desert breeze and the warmth of the fire nearby. He thought of Naeli, of the lessons she had taught him, and of the life he had begun to build in this new world. He understood that the bond between them had become real, not through force or fear, but through trust, effort, and mutual respect. For the first time since his capture, he felt a sense of hope and belonging. The journey was far from over, but he knew that with patience, courage, and understanding, he could face whatever lay ahead, side by side with Naeli. The desert night stretched on, quiet and peaceful. Jacob had grown in ways he had never imagined. He had learned the value of respect, honesty, and diligence. He had discovered strength within himself, and he had begun to understand the quiet power of Naeli, a woman whose courage, wisdom, and guidance had transformed his life. And as he drifted to sleep, he felt a sense of gratitude, hope, and anticipation for the days to come, knowing that their shared journey had created a bond that would endure, built on respect, understanding, and the challenges they had overcome together.